Hi, I'm Reggie Harris, and I'm running for Cincinnati City Council in 2021. Hi, Jim. Welcome to We Will, the Reggie for Cincinnati podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Reggie, I'm thrilled to be here. It's great to see you, great to talk, and I'm looking forward to a fun conversation.
Awesome. So, Jim, so that folks, so that you know, We Will, the Reggie for Cincinnati podcast is really a behind the scenes look of what it takes to run a local city council race. And so we're using this opportunity to speak with community experts and to speak with people who have deep connections with Cincinnati. And we're going to be talking to members of my team to create more transparency about the conversations that take place behind the scenes for a campaign and show what are all of the building blocks and how do candidates arrive at policy decisions and how do they arrive at sort of ideas they would have. And so we are so happy to have you here.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks.
So, Jim, for folks who may not know who you are, which they are probably living under a rock if they don't, but for folks who don't know who you are, will you please introduce yourself and introduce the process, the very sort of intimate part of your life, from my perspective, that you so graciously, I feel like, shared with the world to advance LGBTQIA equality. So, would you just give us an introduction?
Absolutely, Reggie. And sometimes I feel like everybody in the world knows me, knows who I am. And I always have to remind myself that isn't the case. It might feel like that way to me, but not everyone does. So, again, I'm Jim Obergefell, and my last name is pretty well known. It's become shorthand for marriage equality in the United States because I was the lead plaintiff in the landmark Supreme Court civil rights case Obergefell v. Hodges, which made marriage equality for same sex couples the law of the land across all 50 states. And that happened out of the blue for me. My late husband, John, and I had been in Cincinnati. I lived in Cincinnati for more than 30 years. John and I met in Cincinnati and became a couple in Cincinnati. And in 2011, John was diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. And as he was nearing the end of his life, he was in at-home hospice care, and I was his full-time caregiver, other than a couple hours a week when hospice nurses visited. On June 26, 2013, I was standing next to his bed holding his hand when the Supreme Court, in their decision on Windsor versus the United States, United States versus Windsor, they struck down the Defense of Marriage Act. And I spontaneously proposed to John. And he said yes, because we had wanted to get married for years, but we both agreed that for us, marriage couldn't just be symbolic. It had to be something that carried legal weight. And so with the court striking down DOMA, we could finally get married and actually have it mean something, at least to the federal government. So because of John's health, he was bedridden, could do nothing for himself. We chartered a medical jet and flew to Baltimore, Washington International Airport from Lincoln Field, where we landed at BWI and parked on the tarmac and were married inside that chartered medical jet by John's favorite Aunt Paulette. And that was all we wanted to do, simply get married and live out John's remaining days as husband and husband. But then a couple days later, we were introduced to an attorney who said, do you guys get it? When John dies, his last official record as a person, his death certificate will be wrong. Ohio will say he's unmarried, and Jim, your name won't be there as his surviving spouse. So at that point, we decided to file suit against the state of Ohio and the city of Cincinnati to demand legal recognition of our lawful marriage. And that was the start of an almost 2-year process that took me to the Supreme Court as the named plaintiff.
So, Jim, I have heard this story or this version of the story a couple times, and the part that I actually did not recall was the impetus for the proposal, right? And so again, I just think one of the things that's so striking to me about this case and about uh, what emerged from that is that these really were just super intimate moments of your life, right? You that when looked through a legal lens, recognize that these moments would be interrupted or not be allowed to be preserved in the way that our heterosexual counterparts could have them be preserved. And so this idea that like, you were with John, holding his hand, when the United States versus Windsor decision came down. Again, I'm just so struck by the intimacy of all of it and how and I guess I want to thank you. And we talked about this earlier. I feel like a lot of gay couples, you probably get a lot of gay couples that come up to you and say, "Thank you so much. Thank you for what you did." How does that impact you? What is that like for you?
People, well, when I talk to people or meet people, they often think that the really kind of amazing things I've been able to experience, meeting President Obama, meeting the First Lady, meeting Vice President Biden and Dr. Biden at that time, all of those really amazing things, people think those are the things that I remember the most or that are the most meaningful to me. And while I have to admit, meeting President Obama was one of the most incredible moments of my life, the things that really stick with me, the things that really make a difference and matter to me, are those personal one on one interactions with people like me, just everyday people who stop me on the street and hug me, pre-pandemic, hug me, shake my hand, tell me stories, show me photos, talk about their countless anniversaries, the anniversary of our first date or the day we met, the anniversary of when we had a commitment ceremony, the anniversary of when we got married in another state, the anniversary of when we redid it in our own state because it now was legal in that state. Those are the moments that really matter to me. And especially when young people come out to me, they've never come out to anyone else, even themselves. They've never said the words, "I'm gay" or "I'm a lesbian" out loud to anyone. And that's happened to me multiple times after I speak. Those moments are so incredible, Reggie. Those are the moments that just bring home to me again and again what John's and my fight meant to our nation, to people across our nation and the world. And you're right, it was a very personal thing. Here was John dying, and we didn't know how much time we had left together. We knew it wasn't long. And we let the world into that. We let others into that because for us, we wanted our marriage to mean something.
Mm.
We wanted Ohio to respect it. And that was all our fight was. We wanted to matter. We wanted to exist. We wanted to be seen by the state we called home. And giving up some of that privacy and letting people into our very personal world, the pain and the challenges we were experiencing, it was an easy thing to do because it was just for the right reason.
Jim, it's in that spirit that I want to be one of those people, and I want to share with you because the Obergefell v. Hodges case was really important to me and my husband because so my husband and I have been together for 15 years. And I know you may think, how could someone so young be with someone for 15 years? It's because we met at our quinceañera. No. Um, no, we've been together 15 years and we've been married for 11 years. And we got married in 2009 and we got married. He is from Massachusetts, from southeastern Massachusetts, just outside of
Okay.
Providence, Rhode Island. So we got married in his parents' backyard legally. And then the next day, we had our big wedding celebration with our friends and family. It was like 150 people in Little Compton, Rhode Island. And so, during the time of our marriage, we lived in Boston and we lived in Chicago, both Massachusetts and Illinois, had recognized same sex marriage in the state. When my husband is an academic and he got a tenure track job at Miami University, and we found that out in February of 2015. And, this was his dream, and Miami University is a fine institution. But one of the things that we felt really nervous and hesitant about was that Ohio at the time did not recognize same sex marriage. And so we were wrestling with how do we begin to think about going from living in states that recognized our union, and we had the protections of those states, to moving to a new state for professional opportunity, but then risking losing those state protections. And in June of 2015, the your landmark case was decided, and we were in P-Town or Provincetown. And for those of you who don't know Provincetown, it's a slice of gay heaven on the tip of Cape Cod. And then it made our move to Ohio a no-brainer, right? It was like, yeah, okay, great. We are fully recognized people. And now we have the opportunity, just like our hetero counterparts, to, be explorers, to move to any state in our country and begin our lives. So it's really significant in lots of ways.
Oh, it is. And that was such a big part of our case. The fact that you could be legally married, and if you end up moving like you did for work or for changes in family, or if you were in the military and you were reassigned to a different state, as soon as you crossed a border, you suddenly lost all of these rights, all of these protections, all of these responsibilities that come with marriage. And that was just, first off, unjust, discriminatory, and just created this mess for people in legal relationships. And in no way could I understand why anyone thought that was just or right or constitutional, especially with the Equal Protection Amendment. So yes, I'm not surprised, Reggie, that made your husband's decision to accept that position and to move to Ohio made that such less scary. So no, I'm thrilled, and I hear stories like that again and again.
I can only imagine. Yeah, so as an extension of this work, Jim, and as an extension of this idea of thinking about LGBTQIA equality, the sort of theme of our conversation today, I wanted to chat with you about this idea of representation and solidarity. I've been reflecting a lot about what it means for me to be a Black LGBTQIA candidate for Cincinnati City Council, and to be a queer candidate in a city that has had such an up and down history with LGBTQIA folks, from Article 12, to our equality ordinance, to our ban on conversion therapy, and to electing Councilmember Chris Seelbach as our first openly gay council person, to having a second election of a openly queer Black woman in Tamaya Denard, and then thinking about how we have gotten a 100 on the HRC, sort of city equality index. I think many think like, okay, well, we've arrived. But what I have observed in my time in this city is that though we have representation, solidarity to the cause and solidarity to all of the factors that create hostile environments for LGBTQI folks still need to be addressed. This is a city in which Black queer visibility is incredibly lacking. Um, and so, part of what I would like for you to chat about with us is, from your perspective, what is the next step, right, in thinking about this in the fight for LGBTQIA equality? And then we know that our trans brothers and sisters are, on the front lines of fighting for their lives. Uh, and so there is still much work to do there from a legislative perspective. Uh, but then when we have cities that have made these policy steps forward, then what do we do next? How do we further that? And I would love to hear from you, your perspective.
For me, it's an amazing thing to think about how far Cincinnati has come. And I always like to sing the praises of Cincinnati because of how it has changed. You brought up issue 3, the charter amendment that banned protections or laws to protect the LGBTQ plus community. Maplethorpe, from the darkest of times for the LGBTQIA community in Cincinnati to today, with all of the great things that Cincinnati as a city has done, the changes, the protections, and just the cultural and social movement in the city. It's been amazing. But you're right. I think like anywhere in the United States, you can think about San Francisco. I think arguably most people, when they think about, one of the most LGBTQIA supportive cities, it's kind of our spiritual home in a way. Even San Francisco still has issues with homophobia, with anti-trans, and not necessarily from a city perspective, but from people who live in the city. And I think that's really the issue we have across the nation is continuing our efforts to change hearts and minds, not of our legislators, not of policymakers, but of the people on the street. And there's been such a sea change in Cincinnati and other cities, but we still have work to do. And I think that's one of the most important areas for us to focus on. And I think about my experience with marriage equality. John and I had this story that people across the country could relate to, and we shared our story. Harvey Milks had come out, share your story. It's how we're going to change things. Well, John and I shared our story, and it was a story of love and loss that pretty much everyone could relate to. And it helped make that, what was for a lot of people, abstract idea of marriage equality, it's made that abstract idea something they could relate to and connect to because they could relate to loving someone and losing someone they loved. So I think it's really in the hearts and minds of our fellow Americans where we have opportunity, but it's also where we have a lot of work to do. And once we change hearts and minds on the street, that has an impact on the people we elect to our offices because we then will start electing people who share those values. But you're right, Reggie. I think about our transgender siblings. They are under attack right now, and it's despicable, it's deplorable, it's inhumane the way they are being treated. You know, opponents of equality, opponents of our community, they like to pick on the most vulnerable, and the transgender community absolutely is the most vulnerable. And they're bearing the brunt of all of that hatred across our nation, on the streets, but also in city halls and in state houses with these terrible anti-trans bills that are being proposed, passed, and enacted into law. So that's one of the areas where I think we have much work to do. But for me, I think some of the opportunity we have to make a change is taking the efforts we've made at city levels for non-discrimination protections and taking them statewide. There are a lot of states that have statewide anti-discrimination ordinances for our community, but there are a lot that don't, including Ohio. So I think it's one of those things where we have to be active outside of our city limits. We have to be active at a state level to help move those types of things forward. Yes, most things are local, but we also have to realize that some of those local things we need to think at a state level as well. Because even though you're in Cincinnati or Columbus or Cleveland right now, when they have these types of ordinances, you don't know what life will bring and you might end up in a small city or a different city that doesn't have them. So I think that's one of the things we have to do is also not lose sight of the things we can and should be doing at a state level.
Absolutely. And so you brought up two very interesting points that I wanted to follow up on. And one is, uh, thinking about our work at the state level. And so, plugging both of our affiliations and work with Equality Ohio, which is Ohio's, state LGBTQIA civil rights organization, and, our fight for the push for the Ohio Fairness Act. And when I talk to folks, about LGBTQIA civil rights, I explained to them that yes, the Supreme Court Title IX ruling that ruled sex covering sexual orientation and gender expression and identity, right, as a protected class was super important in the federal context, right, for employment, right,
Right.
for businesses that have 15 or more people. But we still need the Ohio Fairness Act, right, to fill in those gaps, right, related to employment. So we can have these extra layer of protections for, the intersectionality, of folks, gender identity and LGBTQIA status. But then we also still need the Federal Equality Act, because then that is a place that rules and gives protections for public accommodation and housing. So, the fact that we need that Title IX ruling, we need the Federal Equality Act, and we need these state protections. Um, I think a lot of folks may not realize that we need all three of those levels in order to begin to achieve full equality in all senses of the word, in sense of the word equality. And then you also talked about this idea of changing hearts and minds. And I have to share with you, Jim, when I was a younger gay man, I was quite militant. And I was like, listen, I don't care about hearts and minds. If you don't like me, that's your issue, but I want the laws to protect me. And,
Mhm.
because it came from this rage. And as I get older, I actually do recognize, and particularly when we talk about all of the isms, racism, sexism, that there is a huge component, the hearts and mind component. And there is that work because there's just the hate that comes with it is
The unhinged hate.
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So listen, Jim, I think that we could do this all morning and solve all of the problems.
Wish we could.
But I do want us to wrap up, and I've been doing this really. I think it's kind of a fun ending to our chats, and so we're gonna do a 1 minute rant that we are calling the "What Bothers Me" rant. And so, Jim, as you know, we're gonna pick a topic. It can be anything that you want, that you feel that you want to rant about for 1 minute. And we're gonna time ourselves. And when I get to 30 seconds, or when either of us gets to 30 seconds, we'll just yell out 30 seconds. We'll yell out a 15-second warning and a 5-second warning. And we are going to interject the phrase "what bothers me" uh, in our rant as much as possible. So I'll go first, and so you can pull out a timer on your phone and time me. So remember, you're gonna give me a 30-second, a 15, and a 5. And then when you let me know when to start, I'm gonna start my "what bothers me" rant.
Okay, I'll count in. Three, two, one, start.
You know what bothers me, Jim? What bothers me is the far right and the dominant cultures, like sort of like being beside themselves about cancel culture. You know what bothers me about that? Conservative religious groups have perfected cancel culture. Like, if you talk to any queer person who is like grew up in a very conservative religious household, they absolutely, in many senses, experience being canceled from their families,
30
canceled
seconds.
from their communities, canceled from, employment related to me. So it bothers me that when marginalized groups use the tools of dominant cultures and sort of large conservative groups back against them, then all of
15
a
seconds.
sudden we have an issue with cancel culture and we actually don't examine the practice itself. So maybe instead of being frustrated with like the woke left
5 seconds.
canceling you, examine the practice of cancel culture, and that is what bothers me.
Time. All right. That's a great one, Reggie. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay. All right, I'm going to pull up my timer and we're going to get you going. I'm going to give you a count in five, four, three, two, one, go.
Reggie, you know what bothers me is the fact that we are both part of the LGBTQIA movement, but the other people, not everyone in our movement cares about everyone else in our movement.
Mm,
What bothers me is the terrible transphobia I see within our community. What really bothers me is the horrible racism and misogyny I see within our community. What bothers me is how many people within our community will say, well, bisexual people don't really
30
exist. They just
seconds.
haven't been able to say, I'm gay. What bothers me is that we have people in our community, in our LGBTQIA community, who are demanding equality, but just for themselves, for their particular letter. If we're not out
15
there fighting
seconds.
for equality for everyone in our community, we have no right to demand equality for ourselves. And taking it even bigger, if we're not out there fighting for
5 seconds.
equality for every marginalized community, we have no right to demand it for ourselves. What bothers me is being selfish.
And done. Ooh, wee, I love it. That was such a good one. Edgem, you nailed inserting the what bothers me. So it was so good. Jim, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing yourself and for your graciousness. I really do appreciate you spending time with us. And what should we be on the lookout for? What are some things? I know that you wrote a book, so
Uh-huh.
please tell us about your book and any other projects you're working on.
Yep. So, yeah, my book came out in June of 2016, Love Wins. And what I like about the book, it's not just about me and John and our attorney, it's about lots of the plaintiffs in the case, other attorneys in the case, plus the some of the judges in the case. So it's the big picture and it's really about how love wins. So there's that. Also in 2015, I co-founded a wine label called Equality Vines. And every wine we release is tied to an organization fighting for equality. So when you buy a bottle, you donate to that organization. We have wines that support LGBTQ rights, women's rights, immigrants' rights, and we're working on a line of wines for racial equality. And I started a new job back in September with Family Equality. It's the only national organization working to create legal and lived equality for LGBTQ plus families.
Wow. Well, Jim, thank you so much. We appreciate you and all that you have done, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, Reggie. Thanks so much.